Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. Pretty dark outside today. It's hard to get any light in this room today, but anyway, I think it's okay. Hopefully, it's working decent. But I want to thank again. There's been a handful of people that have been always commenting on these videos here at on the channel, and on the videos I've been uploading. So I've had this like kind of constant, interaction with some new folks, and really appreciate that because to me, that's really what it's about. Sharing a mutual love and passion for films. So, it's such a huge part of my life. It's such a huge films are such a not only is it such an enjoyable thing for me to do. It's such a For me, it's the best form of escapism. It's also, when it comes to my band Quantum, we just put out our new album about 2 weeks ago, and it was a really, really wonderful time. The films and the film world has more of an influence on that band, really more than anything else. And I know that always sounds odd when I describe that to people, but it's like, obviously, the music I listen to, that plays a huge part in the influence of the music that I write. But for me, films like the art of filmmaking is so multifaceted. You have characters, you have characterization, you have screenplays, you have the narrative, you have the pacing, you have the cinematography, you have the music, the aesthetics. It's all there's so many components to it. And years ago, I was very interested in becoming a filmmaker myself, trying to direct movies, and I have some experience doing that. I did some, the first time I ever tried sort of going into that world, I was in a band many years ago, this punk, noisy punk band, Full Contact Kitty, and we were very much influenced by like David Lynch and Velvet Underground and Andy Warhol, and we had this whole thing of like, where we wanted it to be a very visual thing. So during that time, was working with a friend at the time who was like, in our little friendship or friend circle, who was very much into doing music videos and actually working on documentaries and commercials and things like that. So she had all these nice cameras, and we shot all of these videos, basically these like kind of black and white videos, working with some different models. And what we did was, after we shot all these videos, we spent a lot of time editing and compiling all of this stuff, and everything had this kind of dark, slightly sinister vibe. And what we would do was we would have the those images, those videos that I shot or that I directed. We'd have that broadcasted on the band while we were playing, and that was a lot of fun. We did that for a couple of years, and then fast forward many years later, I directed a film. I did this little independent, super low budget piece of shit of a movie called The Rapture, which was like a short vampire movie, and it was like 25 minutes or something like that. And it was really, really hard, but it was also one of the best experiences in my life because it really gave me a whole new respect for filmmakers and realizing how incredibly complex it is. But I always had a passion. It made me even more of a fan of films. And I had projects and ideas of continuing that and trying to move back into doing those kinds of things and continuing that. But then years later, and again, I got more and more into film and all things that involves over, around that time. And then, years and years later, I started Quantum. And then, you know, I found it was interesting because I found all of that the part of my brain that was really wanting to direct films where I thought about, you know, creating an atmosphere, creating an aesthetic, like the pacing, the way storytelling and characterization, but basically creating a mood or a vibe. With elements of horror and elements of mystery, and definitely elements of science fiction. When I started to kind of, you know, create my band Quantum, suddenly, even though it was not me being a director per se, I found all of those desires and influences were being funneled into the band. And suddenly it became a thing of like, all of those influences were really, really influencing all of the music that we were doing and writing and performing. But then also the visual aspect of the band, where I like to have a real theatrical presentation with the band, with the use of lighting and masks and things like that. And since I created this band and this outlet, I was like, oh, okay, this is a different angle, but this is like satisfying that part of my brain. So that's what I ended up doing was I took those feelings or desires, in the idea of crafting more films or going further into it. I was like, well, how can I do this in a different way? And then it just kind of happened, came out that way. So it was always an interesting process. So, long story short, I really love when people, really comment a lot and show. I love when people show lots of enthusiasm for movies in general, and I love too when people also make, some really cool recommendations on certain films and certain things I haven't seen or I might have seen. So very very cool. But I'm in the midst now of doing a show or a series of shows on the Superman franchise. So I'm starting to I've been watching. I'm done with the first two, and I'm covering all of the movies starting with it's the Christopher Reeve franchise from the first one, which is today's show. I'm going to be talking about the first Superman, which came out in '78, and I'm going to be talking about all those movies in the franchise. The thing that got me back into doing this, because I realized I have covered these movies to some degree, or at least a few of them, but I've never tackled this franchise, as far as turning it into a series for Film Fanatic. So I thought, oh, that'd be really cool because I've been doing the last year or two. I've been doing more and more shows on franchises, and I really love it. I actually really like it. It gives me a different perspective because usually when I'm doing these shows and I'm watching the movies in preparation, I'll see these movies anyway. But with doing these shows, what I end up doing is I'm watching each film in succession in time order in real time. So everything, each previous movie, each thing I've seen or experienced is still like fresh. And I really appreciate that, and it gives me a new respect for the film, and it might even, for good or bad, it might change my perspective, but it's different. Everything is still, alive in my head as far as what I'm experiencing, so it's a lot of fun. And the movie that started this idea was I did a show, and I think I uploaded it yesterday. I'm a huge Superman fan. My favorite superhero, and it's ironically, I love the MCU up until a point. I've kind of gone through some rough patches of fatigue around all of the Marvel movies that have come out. Although I think Deadpool and Wolverine is kind of a masterpiece, but before that, it had been a while. Endgame, the Avengers movie, and then even I think it was the last Spider-Man movie, Homecoming. Those are the two last movies that I thought were just incredible. But those were quite a few years ago now. So, but ironically, and I do like some of the DC, universe, but or as a whole, there's more quality in the Marvel movies. but there are some DC movies I really, really like. But ironically, my favorite comic book characters are DC, and that is Batman, who is definitely my all time favorite comic book character, and Superman is has been one of my favorites also for a very, very long time. Also DC, from the DC universe. So a couple nights ago, I bought this. I bought it a couple weeks ago, and I finally watched it. But I got this incredible Blu-ray version of The Death of Superman for the animated movie that came out in 2018. Just an amazing movie. I was blown away by it. I'm eager to watch it again. And that spurred on this idea of like, okay, I want to like take a deep dive into the Superman movies because I have, um, I have all of them actually, and I have quite a few. I have a few of the Justice League movies, but I also have some of the Superman um, animated films. So this is what this is a part of. So the first movie today is going to be about 1978's Superman, directed by Richard Donner, starring Christopher Reeve, Margaret Kidder, and Gene Hackman, Terrence Stamp, and of course the iconic Marlon Brando. What what else can you say about this movie? I finished it last night. It's I think my favorite in the entire franchise of with Christopher Lee is probably the second film, and I did a show on that which I haven't uploaded yet because I kind of did these out of order, but I watched the first one last night. But the second one's probably my favorite. The first one's really just fantastic. It is that movie. The movie itself, when you think about kind of where we are now, or where we have been for like the last 15 years, where there are so many superhero movies coming out, where it's to the point of where it can make you want to vomit or throw up in your mouth. When you think that, and I believe Richard Donner's first film, first Superman movie was really the first like live action film, big budget Hollywood live action film, um, dealing with bringing an iconic superhero to the big screen. I don't think I unless I there's something I'm missing, but I believe it's like the first of its kind. And it's crazy when you think that wow, like that came out in '78, just so long ago, closing in on 49 almost 50 years ahead of its time. And again, I watched it last night and it's still amazing. And the Christopher Reeve movies, the first two movies especially, were movies that I saw constantly as a kid. They were definitely the first superhero movies I saw. They were, they were movies that I always watched all the time. Superman, especially, was like I remember seeing that as a little kid, and that would be on, it was on cable at the time, so it would be something I would watch, whenever it was on. I would always watch, and then it was always like when I got a little bit older and VHS became a thing, and suddenly like you could rent movies. That became another, that was a staple of my diet growing up as a kid. And that was one of those things, it was like Superman. Um, I was really into cartoon wise. I was really into like He-Man, Voltron, the Thundercats, and I was really, really into like the Incredible Hulk, the TV show. Um, Knight Rider was another show, and right around that time, shortly after, was when I first kind of got exposed to horror films. It was these films were and those TV shows, and especially Superman, which is what I'm talking about today. That was a little bit a few years before because I was younger, but that was before I kind of got bitten by the horror bug, or before I discovered horror films. So I mean, these movies mean so much. Definitely, I still think that they hold up incredibly well. They still look great. Again, the other thing is there's no CGI whatsoever. Everything is like in camera. It's pretty amazing how they pulled off some of the stuff. Obviously, I do need to get an upgrade because I don't own any of these movies, unfortunately, on Blu-ray, which is kind of ridiculous. But I got this DVD collection last year or the year before, and it's got all of the Superman movies in it, and it's pretty awesome. It's a pretty good package. The quality is pretty good. I definitely need to get an upgrade. I don't have any of the live action Superman movies on Blu-ray, which is weird. So at some point, I'm gonna have to remedy that because I think it will make a difference. I mean, because it's you could tell. I mean, you could tell at times, but it's still so well done that you kind of forget about it. And I think overall, it still looks spectacular. Um, I love the. I'm a huge fan of practical effects. One of the movies I'm gonna watch again, and it's one of those movies I've always had a mixed thing about, where there are certain things about the film I think are amazing and awesome, and then there are certain things about the film that I that I can't really stand. And one of the movies I'm probably going to review again because I think I do have it on Blu-ray and I have done a review of it, but I'm going to try watching it in this whole series of watching Superman movies and see if I have a different opinion. But that is A Man of Steel with Henry Cavill that came out a few years back, and that is a new adaptation or newer adaptation of Superman. And um, there are, uh, and it was directed by Zack Snyder. And there are certain things about that film that I think are amazing and awesome, especially like the first half of the movie. But then there are also things about it that I just um, feel like it's CGI overload. I don't know. It's a funny thing. So, but at face value, I'm gonna watch it. I'm trying to, even though I have these polarizing opinions that are in conflict of each other around the film, I'm gonna still give it another chance. But overall, I prefer watching the Richard Donner films because it feels real. Everything you're seeing is real. It's in camera, and it feels more real. It feels like it's lived in. It makes the experience more spectacular, I think. And again, from a creative standpoint, there's a time and place for everything. But I generally feel that it's something I kind of gravitate towards. Um, you know, music that I really love, or it could be in any medium, whether it's a painter or a film or director or a writer. I kind of always love things when they're they leave like interpretation for the person who's experiencing that particular art. You know, and I believe pretty heavily in the idea of like less is more. Like having a little bit of restraint, and I think by having a little bit of restraint, from the artist's perspective, obviously there's a time and place for things to where you want things to go off the rails, maybe get a little crazy and explode. But I think overall, the more dynamic of that you can have in your work, and having this idea of like less is more makes it more exciting for the viewer or the person experiencing your art. And I kind of feel like with Richard Donner, I mean, obviously it was due to limitations, but there's still like those limitations because there was no technology really work for this movie, and it's never it's never too much. It's like these elaborate, huge action sequences that take place in Metropolis are amazing, but it never feels like it's overkill. And everything is practical effects. Everything feels real. Whereas with Zack Snyder's film, it feels like it is more is more, and it's like after a while it just looks digital. It doesn't. Yeah, sure. From a technical standpoint, you can pull off more, but I'm more in step with, well, because you have those limitations, it forces you to like think outside the box a little bit, but then you have to rely more on just sheer creativity. So, but anyway, 1978, an amazing year, a groundbreaking, prophetic movie. Really, so ahead of its time, and I definitely need to get an upgrade. Iconic film, Superman, an amazing cast. I've said that before, where you can't, on paper you can have an amazing cast, and it's not. Sometimes projects will, or movies will sell. That will be their selling point. More or less saying, "Wow, look at this. We've assembled this like megastar cast, so that means the movie's going to be good." That's not the case. But this is one of that's not always the case. It has to be a good story. It has to be well directed. There has to be great characters. But I think this film, Superman, 1978, Richard Donner's version, it's an example of that, of the kind of the stars aligning, where you have this amazing ensemble cast, some of the best actors in the world, all together, and they just have amazing chemistry. And so, yeah, such an awesome movie. And we will see you next time. Peace.